Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of May 23rd, 2024. It is slightly after 6 o'clock, and we do have a quorum this evening, so we will begin, and I will call the meeting to order. The second item on our agenda is always our land acknowledgement, so I will read that for us. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattawandurunk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Regional Municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Item number 3 on our agenda is to ask the members here today if anyone has any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest. I see heads being shaken for no. So we will move on to item number 4, which is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any amendments? And if not, may I ask that someone move and second the agenda? Councillor Howe is so moved. Member Hutchings has put his hand up to second. Then resolved that the May 23rd, 2024 Finance Committee agenda be approved. All in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Item number 5 on our agenda is the receipt of previous minutes, and we have 2 this evening. The first one are the minutes from the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee of May 2nd, 2024. They are being received only as a matter of interest. I don't know if anyone here was even at that meeting or sits on that committee.
I was there just as an attendee.
Okay. So I will do them together then. The item 5.2 is the Finance Committee minutes of April 25th, 2024. Does anyone have any amendments or adjustments to that, to those minutes? Seeing none, then if I could have a mover and seconder to receive the minutes, and I will read the resolution after I have a mover and a seconder. Councillor Thompson, sorry, Member Thompson, thank you. I got to keep these titles straight. My apologies. Councillor Howe will second that. So resolved that the following minutes be received: the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes of May 2nd, 2024, and the Finance Committee minutes of April 25th, 2024. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is carried. Moving right along, agenda item number 6 is delegations and presentations, and we have none of those this evening. So we will then move to item 7, and although it is under consent reports, technically we would have to lift it to talk about it. So I have it here under consent reports. Would you like to lift it to have a discussion about it, or? The report was quite detailed. Any questions about it? I guess technically if you have any questions, then we have lifted it, so. I'm not seeing any questions, so then I would ask for a mover and a seconder to approve that, that particular report. Member Hutchings? Thank you. And Councillor Howe has seconded that. So resolved that the Finance Committee hereby approves the following item, and that the consent item be approved on the recommendation as contained therein, that the memo Peach King Centre expansion cost update dated May 23rd, 2024 be received for information. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Is that a yes? It was a slow hand.
Actually, I see something I want to ask a question.
Pardon me, but we have already had our vote, so we'll let you ask the question though.
Oh, really? I'm parliamentary. There's a very small. I read this last night, and I apologize. I wasn't going to ask any questions today. I was going to be very quiet today, but then this jumped off the page at me. So I just want to ask the question, if I can. There's a very, and this is an excellent report. That's why I wasn't going to ask any question, but I just saw. So on the tendering, it said on page 204, it says, note that soft costs and contingency are excluded from the hard construction budget listed in table 2 below. Now, if we look at table 2, it's listed here. I'm just wondering, so are the soft costs are they in this budget at all, or is this outside the budget? Or is this in table 2? Sorry, maybe I'm misreading this.
Yeah, through the chair, that would be included if you look at table 1.
Okay.
You're included in that total $36.7 million overall budget. And then the hard costs of the $30,200,000 is what's broken out in table 2. And that's why we have the note there that the soft costs are separate from the 30 million. That's just the hard costs.
Excellent, thank you. I now can vote in favor.
Thank you. So we will consider that carried. Small deviation there, but we'll let you. The next item on our agenda is our discussion report of BYL 24-04 on the vehicle replacement. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get this item on the floor? Councillor Howe and Member Thompson, thank you. So I'll turn it over to you, Tony, and let you walk us through this.
Thank you. So the report is before you to request to use $40,000 from the bylaw equipment replacement reserve to purchase a replacement vehicle for bylaw services. The existing vehicle is a 2017 model and is in need of a major repair estimated at $6,000. Given the age and the mileage on the vehicle, there is a high probability that it may need more repairs in the near future. Further to that, due to the size of the current vehicle, it isn't meeting operational needs at the moment. Now, Bylaw did purchase a mid-size SUV last year that is meeting operational needs, and the plan is to purchase another similar vehicle valued at about $33,000 to $36,000. The new vehicle will have a life expectancy of 10 years. So the purchase would be funded from the Bylaw Equipment Replacement Reserve, which currently has an unallocated balance of $102,000 and would have an unallocated balance of $62,000 should the funding be approved. The purpose of that reserve is to purchase replacement vehicles and other ancillary equipment for Bylaw purposes. Now, Bylaw only has 2 vehicles in total, and since the other vehicle was just replaced last year, we're not expecting another major purchase from this reserve in the near future. So happy to take any questions or comments at this time.
Do any members have questions? Member Thompson.
Right.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. Director, I'm just curious, a couple things you just mentioned in there, I just picked up on it. The policy outlines a life expectancy of 10 years. We just seen 6 years from this vehicle, and you had many miles on it. And if I remember right, many of the vehicles after 7 years seems to be a really sweet point. So are we looking out too far on vehicles like this? Maybe we should be looking at 7 years to 8 years. And then I have a second question.
Through the chair, yeah, I mean, that's a good thought. I mean, those life expectancies are just estimates. I think given the relative late use of the vehicles compared to some of the other fleet equipment, maybe that's where the 10 years is likely coming from. But certainly if we're noticing a repeated pattern where we're having to replace before that 10 years, then that's something we'll have to monitor and possibly change.
Yes, thank you, and through you, Chair. The second question was just looking at the GMC vehicle. I appreciate you're looking at the one vehicle because of another vehicle from last year and what you're experiencing. I was just curious, the town has been promoting environment with the trees to everything else. Have we been looking at any other type of vehicles, from hybrid vehicles to full electric?
Yeah, through the chair, that's certainly something that needs to consider probably more in-depth in the future. And I know that those hybrid and electronic vehicles lend themselves more to lighter duty vehicles and heavier at the moment. So really it's on a case-by-case basis. I know we do have believe we do have at least one hybrid vehicle in the fleet currently, but it is case by case. And in this case, because of the unplanned nature of the expense and the conditions in the market, it's more likely that we'll find something suitable in that, what they're looking for. Thank you.
Councillor Howe?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Is this something, though, Director, that maybe we should put into print? I don't think we've got it, taken that kind of approach of the modern types of equipment for the smaller jobs. The bigger jobs, no, I don't think anything's there yet, but it should be something that we should incorporate into some of our language.
Through the chair, yeah, I think it's something that's worth consideration for future asset management plans. So as we'll be talking about that soon, and as they get further broken out into more detail, then I think that would be something that's worth considering in part of a total value plan, not just the cost of the vehicle, but also the environmental benefits associated with that, certainly.
And is it something that we should work at getting down into black and white in print so that everybody's got it and we're aware of it?
Through the chair, yeah, I think that would be something that each of the individual asset areas might need to look at rather than as the finance committee, I would say. But I think the individual asset areas would need to look at that as their own individual policies as applicable.
Thank you.
Member Hutchings?
So, I know Town of Grimsby's, and you're new, so I get it, good answer so far from being new. I know other municipalities do have climate change initiatives, and they have a policy on climate change. They look at facilities, they look at vehicles. They have, so that there is then a policy, it's central. It's not just departmental, it becomes a central policy that the municipalities moving in that direction, because in some municipalities have declared climate change emergencies, and which are still standing. And then after that, what happens, there's analysis done by fleet departments to see if what sort of duties, as you're saying, Councillor Howe, many municipalities are finding that the cars are there, but the trucks aren't for the heavy duty stuff. And so many municipalities are requiring that the cars they're buying are electric and or hybrid. And so there's, it's, to the director's point, it may be done in the town of Grimsby by department, but a lot of times it's started corporately with a corporate policy, direction we want to take, and then usually that from there it spills out to all the departments. So just to supporting the director's point of view.
As everyone has had a chance to speak on that, I would just like to add my thoughts on it too. Back in 2010, we purchased our first hybrid vehicle for our home. And, the accountant always kept track of her fuel costs and operating costs. And I can tell you that even that many years ago, my fuel costs went and were cut in half. And I lived and worked in this town, so, I'll call it city driving was my life, right? Every day, back and forth to the office, clients, and into town, right? And the fuel bill was cut in half. My fellow accounting friend said to me, now, Delay, why are you doing this? Are you sure there's really a payback here, et cetera, et cetera? And I said, well, not absolutely positive. I have a positive payback on this, but at some point in time, I think those of us who can afford to do this, if we don't take those steps and try and be green, Kermit, then who is going to, right? So sometimes it's not always about the dollars. It's about, as you said, climate change. It's about emissions. It's about the future we're leaving for our children and grandchildren. And so those are hard to quantify, right? They're not, says the accountant, who would like to quantify everything in this case, right? And so, electric vehicles, are even more expensive, because I've gone that way too. But certainly hybrids are just, they're almost standard these days. And I would expect that for most of our staff who are, I'll say, running around town, mostly, they're going to be driving around town, they're going to be in the same position I was in, that's where they're using their vehicle, and that's where hybrids really excel, from that starting and stopping and releasing the energy to reinvigorate the battery all the time. So I hear all of you. I would really like to even see this committee, put forward a policy that we could recommend to council that says, we would like each of our departments to always look at the viability of a hybrid vehicle before they make future purchases. But rather than try and put words into everybody's mouth, we can go with something like that, or does the committee feel they would like to refer it back to staff and perhaps come back with a corporate policy that we could consider to endorse for council? Member Thompson, what would you like to add to that?
Exactly what you just said, because what Member Hutchings had said. Let corporate deal with it from a high level to bring it down to each department. I think that's perfect.
Then I think we probably still need a resolution to ask our finance director to take it back to corporate and to look into I'll call it a financial policy, but a purchasing policy to always, consider and evaluate hybrid vehicles in the purchase.
So are you deferring this report then? Or is that going to be separate from?
That'll be separate.
That'll be separate.
I think given the urgency around this particular vehicle, it's something they need to do. What we have been discussing, I think, by everybody's expressions here is probably just a secondary addendum to what we've been talking about. So we will come back to the resolution to ask you to consider approving this, but do you need us to have a separate resolution to refer the second part back to staff then, for a corporate policy on that? That would probably be good.
Because this one is just about the approval,
Yes,
and then that could be a second one.
yes, okay.
So I think it would be
Let's do this in order.
this vote
First.
and then your second
Second resolution.
would be, it wouldn't be deferring this report.
No.
It would be recommending to council that finance staff bring forward this
Yes.
policy.
Okay, just to repeat out loud, so what we are going to do is, and we did have a mover and a seconder for this already, we're going to move to the vote to, on the actual bylaw vehicle replacement first, and then we will have a second resolution to talk about a corporate purchasing policy on hybrid or electric vehicles. So I will read the resolution. Resolved that report BYL 24-04, the bylaw vehicle replacement dated May 23rd, 2024, be received, and that the Finance Standing Committee approve the purchase of a bylaw vehicle with a budget amendment of $40,000. And secondly, that the Finance Standing Committee approves the budget amendment of $40,000 be funded from the bylaw equipment replacement reserve. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is carried. Then to go to Part B. Yes, Member Thompson?
I'm a bit confused when we're going to try and bring in a finance, I guess this bylaw that you were thinking of, this amendment to put in, a policy. Should we not just allow possibly council, yourselves, to take this back to your council and make the CAO deal with this from a climate, a big policy, and then it's basically in place from there, that each department will look at it once the policy is in place? And maybe finance doesn't have to have a separate policy. We don't.
No, I hear you, but I think I was thinking that it would be a recommendation from finance to council that our town manager and corporate services look into a corporate policy on the purchase of hybrid vehicles where it is viable. Councillor Howe?
Could the director just we request that he come back to the next finance meeting with, a resolution or suggestion. I don't think we need to be that formal with it, and that starts to put a lot of onus. It allows people to think a little bit. That's the way I would, quite frankly, like to see it, but what...
Tony, do you want to add any comments to that?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, we could come forward with a kind of a draft policy on something like that to keep that, as a consideration in mind. I mean, obviously, there's other considerations given budgets and other needs, but I think looking at that as a total, like I said before, kind of a total value approach when looking at it as environmental benefits and costs as well. So that to be like a requirement for future purchases. I believe that sounds like the idea.
Member Hutchings?
I'm not quite sure, I'm sorry.
We'll
I'm
let
just jumping in. Sorry.
Councillor Howe finish.
Sorry. Not quite sure that want you to champion that whole thing, because it's, there's more to it than finance, obviously. There's a lot of players coming into this. I guess I'm thinking you taking it to the CLT and, then allow that to get shaken out of the trees there.
Yeah, through the chair, I think that could be an avenue that we could take, yeah.
Member Hutchings, did you want to add anything to that?
I think there's two things we're talking about here, and like they're closely defined. That if I can, so I wrote down a motion. So there's one thing that's for the basically the CEO to work with CLT on creating a climate change initiative kind of policy. That's big. That's going to take them a while. But the smaller one is that I wrote here, the staff be direct. I agree we should do the other because it's in your strategic priorities. Your top three things, or one is climate. Here and nature. Here in Grimsby, if you look at your strategic plan, your top three priorities, one of them is nature. But just to deal with the vehicle issue, I wrote here the staff be directed to create or amend the purchasing policy to consider hybrid vehicles. Initially, or whatever we want to say, but it's kind of a subset. If you had a bigger policy, but I'm just saying this would solve the current issue around the vehicles. But then you may want to somewhere at council have a further discussion about one of your priorities being nature, and climate change falls under that. And maybe you want to do a bigger policy, and a whole bunch of things. Facilities. Do you want to go net zero in your facilities? I shouldn't say that when you're already in the middle of building a huge facility. Well, it's going to add dollars onto it, but it's a big discussion, and that your council should have that. It's when do you start investing it and start talking that way, and that's but just to solve this, I would say it's just that's right. My suggestion is, and I can put that on the floor whenever you're ready, Chair.
I think as a finance committee, the purchasing and procurement policy falls under our bailiwick as well, and. So I think that your suggestion that there just be an amendment to that policy seems logical, that it would come from the Finance Committee to, ask our staff and to recommend to council an amendment to the policy or an addendum to the policy. Does that make sense to everyone else? Okay, then I will ask Mr. Delmonico, do you have any comments before I ask Member Hutchings to read his resolution again?
Just checking on the procurement bylaw as it's currently written, and there is a section in their bylaw currently about environmentally sound acquisitions that I'll read it to you if that helps. It says departments will endeavor to include specifications and solicitation documents that provide for energy efficient products, reusable products, and products that contain the maximum level of post-consumer waste and or recyclable content without significantly affecting the intended use of the product or service. It is recognized that cost analysis is required in order to ensure that the products are competitively priced. So there is already in the procurement bylaw a recognition that that should be taken into account, just for the information of the committee.
And I'm glad to hear that that is in there, but I think it would probably still be good if we had this addendum to it even. So just to make it crystal clear that, step one, I think what this committee is saying, step one is whenever we're looking at vehicles specifically, that we look at the viability and the needs of a hybrid vehicle at a minimum versus a regular gas vehicle. How do the committee members feel about this, though? I'm going to say, Member Hutchings, why don't you read that part of the resolution, and we'll
It's just-
have it recommended as an adjustment to our purchasing policy.
Since the director's raising the purchasing policy, which I was aware of, then I might even go back and say that the purchaser of this will consider that in the policy, because it doesn't seem that it's been considered. But anyway, my suggested motion is that staff be directed to create or amend the purchasing policy to consider the purchase of hybrid vehicles before regular gasoline vehicles.
That is, sounds good. That is moved by Member Hutchings. If we could have a seconder on that, Councillor Howe. And I will say, just based upon some emails before the meeting, that the lead time on some of these hybrid and electric vehicles is quite long. It's an urgent matter to replace this vehicle, which I think is why they had to hurry over the step of, looking at buying one that was a hybrid. But it would be good to be really clear that going forward, we'd like to see that as a necessary step. So I will ask for a show of hands for all those in favor of the amendment to the purchasing policy as worded. And that is carried. Thank you. Item 9 on our agenda is correspondence, of which there is none. Item 10 under other business is the appointment of a vice chair. Our vice chair and the council member resigned at our last meeting. And so we need to replace the position of vice chair. If I could ask someone to, I'll say nominate someone, and that would be Member Thompson.
Yes, through you, Chair, I'd like to make the motion to nominate Councillor Howe since he's present, and I'm of the understanding the other councillor has some holidays planned that may take away from a councillor being here, so it would be important to have him around.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that?
I would second that.
Councillor Howe, will you accept the nomination?
From these two guys?
Thank you. Then if I could have a show of hands to let me word it properly, resolve that Councillor Howe be appointed Vice Chair of the Finance Committee. All those in favor by raising their hands, please. Councillor Howe, you can vote for yourself. It's okay. That is carried. Where you're voluntold, I guess? Yeah. Item 10.2 on our agenda tonight is our non-core asset management plan. And Mr. Delmonico is going to share with us and give us a verbal update on where that project stands.
Thank you. Just to give some history, so in 2017, the regulations around asset management planning for municipalities came into effect, and the regulations stipulated that various requirements that municipalities need to fulfill with regards to their asset management plans. And the provincial regulations identified certain deadlines for municipalities to complete their asset management plans, with assets being subdivided into core assets and non-core assets. And so the town retained the services of a consultant to help us complete our core asset management plan. This was endorsed by council in 2022. And so that same consultant has been retained to help us with the non-core plan, which is to be completed and adopted by council by the deadline of July 2024. And that non-core plan is now being finalized, and it is to be presented to council on June 3rd. This non-core plan covers assets such as facilities, parks, outdoor recreation, natural infrastructure, the town's fleet, fire department assets, along with our information technology assets. So the report outlines the quantities, the state of the infrastructure, risks that might be associated with certain types of assets, as well as life cycle management strategies. And of course, it will also help and identify our funding gaps that may exist for the various assets. Now, the final requirement of the provincial regulation will be to identify proposed levels of service, which will need to be completed by next summer, July 2025. So that will be the next phase of the asset management plan. The non-core asset report, as I said earlier, will be published along with the rest of the council agenda on May 30th. It'll become public at that time. And as a reminder, the core asset financial gap was identified at 3.4 million. So whatever is identified here will be added to that gap to give the town's overall annual funding gap. So those gaps, they serve as a good starting point for financial planning on how to close and reduce the gaps to ultimately get us to a fully funded state. And those two reports will serve as key inputs to our 2025 budget as well as future year forecasts. Now, it's important to note that these infrastructure funding gaps, they're not unique to Grimsby. It's something that really most municipalities are going to be dealing with to varying degrees. The important thing is that we're acknowledging this and we start to begin to address these gaps in a financially sustainable way. So if there's any questions or comments at this point, I'd be happy to take them.
If I could just ask, the date that the report is scheduled to go to council is June 3rd. Thank you. Any questions from any members on this? I realize it's just a verbal update, but Member Hutchings?
A couple of questions. Number one, so I guess in summary, what you're saying are as per the provincial requirements, our submissions on core and non-core will be submitted on time.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. As long as it's approved by council.
Is it approved by council? Then therefore, we're not in jeopardy of losing out any grants, because I know we don't get it done on time, then the province won't approve any grants. So there's no jeopardy of that if council approves it.
Through the chair, that's correct. There was requirements to submit the plans per the deadlines were possibly tied to levels of grant funding. So by submitting it on time, that won't cause any issues with possible grants.
Excellent. And the other thing is, I like how you positioned it that the town of Grimsby is not unique, that many municipalities have a gap. I think that was a very polite way of putting it. I think most municipalities have a gap. I think the number, though, for the person watching this on YouTube or wherever you're watching, or live or whatever you're watching this on, may be surprised at 3.4 million, and then you add the non-core. Be very interested to put that in proportion, like of the budgets, and compare that maybe to other, like somebody would say, oh my, $3.4 million is a lot of money. How's the town of Grimsby going to make it up? You may want to look at it and how you put that in proportion to other municipalities in the Niagara region or Hamilton or comparative municipalities, what have you, that it's only 4% of our annual capital or whatever that is, which is you're in a standard range, or just to try to put that, because 3.4 does have a bit of a shock factor, and maybe you can also look at see how we're doing comparably to percentage and to others.
Yeah, through the chair, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll take that into account. I think everyone's going through these plans right now, so as they become published and publicly available, that information should be readily available.
One of the things that we had talked about, too, is other financial data that is good to keep in mind when we get this information. And I always say that, on our financial statements, we have amortization, and it runs about $6 million. The transfers to reserves in the budget were, I believe, just greater than $6 million, but somewhere in that neighborhood as well. And our capital acquisitions, of course, have been all over the board. During COVID, I think we were under $2 million, and then, we start to creep up, and now we have the Peach King Center, which is going to be, north of $30 million. So I realize those numbers, just quoting on a per project basis like that, really distort where we're spending it. But I always take heart by the fact that if amortization is $6 million, we need to, at a minimum, be setting that aside every year, not taking into account inflation and when we'll eventually need the money to replace the capital assets. But, having a transfers to reserve that are at least close to the amortization number always makes me feel much better. And of course, this number is going to now make that number rise even further. So I do hear you, Member Hutchings. It would be good, as information comes from other municipalities, to know how we compare to our neighbors as well. And then related to that, Member Thompson, I haven't forgotten you, because the asset management plan deals with the fleet. So it will be interesting to see the comments from the consultant on the expected lives of some of those vehicles in our fleet, and whether 7 years or 10 years, what is a more realistic number on that, right? So I'm sure you'll be watching that. We were also talking earlier and said that sort of the way that the town is going to work through this process is that this report is going to come to council. But it is also a really, really important report for the finance members. And so wondering if it would be possible, once it goes to council, it's obviously a public document once it's in the agenda and released, but to ask staff if they could, and so Councillor Howe and Councillor Vardy and myself will be getting it just as part of that usual council agenda, but the lay members who sit on our committee would not normally have it provided in that manner. And so just if we could add a notation to the minutes and ask our finance director to email it to our lay members at the same time. I think it'll be a very long report, but a really important one too. Any other questions on that update? Then if we could just add a few things under other business, just of note. One of our members had been asking about a financial policy binder, and whether something like that could be put together. And certain policies are there for council to see on the website, but our lay members don't have access to that section, and it doesn't necessarily include all of our policies. And so wondering, if our lay members would be interested in some sort of document, even a digital document that could be mailed out to all the members of finance, I will say, not just the lay members, and to ask our director if it might be possible to do that in the next month, let's say, put something together like that and send it to all the committee members so that they have that for reference purposes.
Yes, through you, the chair, yeah, that would be totally fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Howe.
Through you, Director, back a couple of months ago, or maybe even 3 months ago, that they were hoping to be able to get the finance to be able to get through the procurement policy in general, in total, to do a review on it. Have they had any chance, or how's that progressing?
Through the chair, yeah, that is on the work plan for the year, and we're expecting, I believe it's the fall, for an update. Yes.
Thank you. I know at our last meeting, we shared the work plan again, and I did not bring that with me to this meeting, so thank you. I believe it is on there, and not forgotten, but yes, keep asking so that we don't forget. And I'm just looking through my list of questions or things to make sure we don't forget about. I don't have anything further. Committee members, do you have any other matters under other business that you'd like to raise at this time? Then, item 11 on our agenda is our next meeting is scheduled for June 27th, 2024 at 6 p.m. and I will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.